Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 952 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today on the podcast, I'll be speaking with a mom of a 12-year-old with type 1 diabetes and Down syndrome. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Few quick things. Join the Facebook group Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes to meet 40,000 other people who are living with diabetes. It's a private group. I think you're going to love it. There's something there for everyone. Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. Doesn't matter what kind of diabetes you have. You're welcome in that group. Other quick stuff. Save 35% off your entire order at CozyEarth.com when you use the offer code JUICEBOX. Get 10% off your first month of therapy at BetterHelp.com/JuiceBox. And to get 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D with your first order, drinkag1.com/JuiceBox. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox.
My name is Johanna. I have 3 daughters, my oldest of which is 12, and she is the one who is type 1 diabetic, and I live in Canada.
Okay, your 12-year-old's a T1. Just for context, how old are your other kids?
They are 8, so I have 8-year-old identical twins, and then the 12-year-old.
Did that, I don't know what phrasing I was just about to use, but my brain was like, don't say it that way. Was that from IVF or luck?
We did have help. So we did actually IUI and Clomid to get pregnant with the twins. But identical twins are spontaneous. And so it was a surprise. We actually were pregnant with triplets at the beginning.
Oh my gosh.
So it looked like the third one was fraternal, but we'll never know, it passed away, and then ended up with identical twins.
Wow.
However, I'm an identical twin myself. So there's no real data about whether identical twins run in families or not. Usually it's fraternal twins, but it's certainly possible. And that's just the way it turned out in our family. I'm an identical twin. I have identical twins.
Wow. My neighbors have 2 sets of fraternal twins.
Wow.
That's interesting. So
yeah,
they had babies twice and ended up with 4 kids, which is the way I think of it.
The 2-for-1 discount. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Less sex, more responsibility. Yeah. Okay. So we're here to talk about your 12-year-old, obviously.
Yes.
And we're not going to use her name. So I'm saying that out loud so everybody knows we're talking around it a little bit, and so that we remind each other of the same thing. So how do you want to refer to her?
As P.
Okay.
So P has Down syndrome. So she was diagnosed at birth with Down syndrome. And people with Down syndrome tend to have a lot of autoimmune conditions. So even though she's been really healthy throughout her whole life, she has sort of developed autoimmune conditions along the way. So at 1 year old, she developed alopecia. So all her hair fell out and it hasn't really ever grown back. At 4, she developed hypothyroidism. And so we've been treating her with Synthroid since then. And then she developed diabetes in January of 2022.
Oh, that's so recently.
Yeah.
Hey, the hypothyroidism, is it Hashimoto's?
They've never called it Hashimoto's, but it is autoimmune. So we did see an endocrinologist. They ran the autoimmune panel. They said, yes, it's autoimmune, but they've never actually called it Hashimoto's.
So unless I'm wrong, that's Hashimoto's.
Okay.
So, hey, we'll Google it later.
Okay.
So, but the diabetes came up, oh my gosh, like not even 10 months ago?
Yeah. So I feel like the triggering event was we had a big family gathering at Christmas. My nephew was sick. P picked it up And so she got quite sick with it. Nothing, I mean, we managed her at home, but she was off, she was sick for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, she started drinking lots of water. And so I had known what drinking lots of water meant. I knew it was a risk factor for diabetes. And eventually it went on long enough that I thought, I need to look into this.
Right.
So I called the pediatrician. He said, yeah, we'll order blood work. So we did blood work on a Friday. He called me at home at 9 o'clock that night and said, you need to go to the hospital. Her blood sugar is really high. So we packed up, went to the hospital, and then we were diagnosed. Like that was a Friday night on Saturday with diabetes.
Yeah. It's not a hard and fast rule. But if your doctor calls you at night to tell you something,
it's a bad sign.
Yeah, prepare yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, we cannot wait till morning. Not a good sign at all.
No,
Johanna,
no.
Okay.
So they tested us. We walked right in to the hospital, into an intake room. They tested her blood sugar right there, and it read high. So I didn't know what that meant at the time. I was like, oh, that's weird. It's high. I didn't know it meant it's so high I can't read it. And so they ended up they did the blood work. Her blood sugar was 36 at diagnosis, which is 648. I did the conversion for you.
Thank you. Wow.
And her A1C was 13.8. So high, but she was not in DKA. She just wasn't that sick. It was just the drink and the urination, or the drinking and the urination that was happening at that point. But they did admit us because it was a weekend. None of the courses started until Monday. And then we got into the diabetes clinic right away on Monday.
Wow. I wonder if, we'll never know. I'm just like thinking out loud, but I wonder if the illness also had her blood sugar driven up as well, because it's a short amount of time, right?
It was. Yeah. Yeah. But the thirst really increased really quickly to a point where I just couldn't ignore it. Okay. Like a day or two, I just thought, it can't be diabetes. It can't be diabetes. And then after a day or two, and it continues, you're like, oh, it's diabetes.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have a I hope not list in the back of your head of things that might happen to her as she got older?
Yes. And that was definitely one of them. So I know of a couple of children in the Down syndrome community that have type 1 diabetes. We don't have anyone in our community group that has it, but I know someone online whose son has type 1 diabetes and celiac. And then I know of a couple other families through social media who have it. And so definitely that was one of it. Wow. One of the things that I was desperately hoping that she would not get. But here we are.
Yeah. Wow. The twins have any issues at all?
ADHD. So they all actually have ADHD.
Okay.
And so they had me to thank for that. And I was only diagnosed with ADHD after all three of them were. And then it finally occurred to me, oh my gosh, they're just like me. And so I went through the diagnosis process with a psychiatrist. And sure enough, I have ADHD as well.
How does that impact them and you?
For the twins and myself, it's emotional regulation. And so for them and myself, we just have tantrums far longer than is really typical for children. And so they're 8 years old and regularly have tantrums where they just cannot, control their emotions. And when you look at size of the problem, it's really quite out of range for the size of the problem of what we're,
I see.
What the denied request is.
I want this spoon, you wanted that spoon, and 4 hours later we're arguing about it still, kind of thing?
Something like that, yeah. Mostly to denied requests. So can I go to the park? No. And then it's a massive meltdown. Okay. And, for students for children in grade 4, like that's a pretty big reaction for
How does that
a no.
How does that look in your life?
For me, so I've had all kinds of issues with emotional regulation growing up. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I had a diagnosis of major depressive disorder. So what happens is when you don't treat emotional dysregulation when you're young, it just turns into something else. So for me, it was anxiety and depression, which has stuck with me throughout my whole life. And so I'm on medication now. I have been for years and years. I do much better on the medication, and being on the medication helps control my ADHD symptoms.
Well, you know what you need, Johanna? A kid with Down syndrome and type 1 diabetes.
Right.
Yeah, that's perfect for you.
Right. So actually, having a kid with Down syndrome has been sort of probably the most transformative experience of my life. So it was the very first thing in my life that a challenge and an issue that I had faced that I couldn't change. So if I, had a job I didn't like, I could change it. If I didn't like what I was taking in school, I could change it. If I didn't like where I was living, I could move. You can't change Down syndrome. You cannot take chromosomes out of people. And so I had so much work to do on my thinking about disability and Down syndrome and cognitive disabilities that I was forced to take on when my daughter was born. And I did take it on, and I worked through it with a counselor, and then just, and by myself eventually. And it was very freeing. So it was very freeing to just be able to let go of my judgments of things all the time, and to really accept my daughter for who she was and where she was at, and really celebrate every single milestone that she went through, and without comparing her to other children. And so I did some work with mindfulness. Mindfulness is when you sort of you pay attention without judging what you're seeing. Mm-hmm. So I could really pay attention to where she was at, the milestone that she was working on, and then really celebrating when she got past it, or when she, met the goal that she was working on. And I still do that to this day. And it really allows me to see her for her without comparing her to other children or her sisters, or, her peers in her classroom.
Right. That seems like a wonderful gift, actually.
It really was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, my last question before I move back to P is, are there other autoimmune issues in your family line?
Oh, yeah. So there's no type 1 diabetes. My grandmother had hypothyroidism, and I think she had, I forget what it's called, but when you lack B vitamins, pernicious anemia. Mm-hmm. And that's it, as far as I know.
Wow. Okay.
So it was out of the ordinary. Oh, my husband's side, they have lots of hypothyroidism, and high blood pressure. I don't know if that's autoimmune, but
I don't think
the whole family has it.
You just get it when you get it when you get your license.
Right.
Yeah.
No, they're Polish. And so I think it's actually very, very common in the Polish community. But,
really?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to take a little time to understand what it's like to raise a child. Is Down syndrome, like, I don't know the phrasing, like I want to say Downs, but I don't know if that's okay. So
in North America, it's Down. And
okay.
so in Europe, they say Downs, but in North America, it's Down syndrome. You can also refer to it as T21 or trisomy 21.
Well, let's try to keep it easier for me. That's not good. Okay. Scott, you can also use four
Down
words.
Is fine.
Yeah. Okay. So Down. Okay. Yeah. But Down syndrome's okay as well.
Oh, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So is this something you know in utero, or do you learn at birth?
It can be both. So we did do the triple screen at around 12 weeks, and our chances of Down syndrome were higher. So it was 1 in 17, which is about a 6% chance. Mm-hmm. And at that time, we just thought, we'll just wait and see what happens at the 20-week ultrasound, see what we can see. Because oftentimes Down syndrome comes with heart defects or other kinds of differences in utero. Mm-hmm. And so we thought we'll just deal with it if we see something different. So we get to the 20-week ultrasound, everything's perfect. She measures perfect. She's a good size. There's like absolutely no differences. So we really just, push it to the back of our heads. This isn't happening. She's not going to have Down syndrome. She's perfect. And so my water broke early, around 36 weeks. We went in, had her. She had low muscle tone when she was born, and they immediately suspected Down syndrome. So we just went through the whole diagnosis process. She needed a little bit of extra help when she was born with the eat, suck, swallow. Mm-hmm. And so she was in NICU for a couple of days, and then was released to us after that, where we went through genetics. And then we got connected to something called the Down Syndrome Clinic, what was in our area. Mm-hmm. And we started receiving therapies right away. So we've got PT, OT, and speech therapy, which is really for eating at that time. And then connected to other families as well who had children right around the same age as us. So we have, 4 or 5 families that we're quite close with that have 12-year-olds with Down syndrome now.
Right. Are you able to, I don't know if you can think back that far, but are you able to absorb it when you're learning it? Or is there so much to do that you go on autopilot and follow what you're told?
It's hard to say. I mean, it was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So there was a time when I just had to wait and let my baby be a baby for the first couple months before I was ready to jump into the Down syndrome clinic and start with the therapies. It was a hard time.
Yeah.
For us. But once I got going and once I realized this is what I need to do for my child to give her the best chance, then I just did it.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask, but I don't want to infer. But is it a feeling of being let down? Is it shock? Like, how does it? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, what's the core value when something this unexpected happens?
I think there's something different when you know right from birth that your child is disabled and that their life is going to look very different from your life. And so I really had to work through that and what it meant to me and then what it meant to her experience in the world. Mm-hmm. And it took a while, but what I came to is that it's okay to have different experiences in the world. Right. And that just because her experience will be different than mine, it doesn't make it less valid. And it doesn't make it something sad or a tragedy. She can have value and worth, and that her value and worth doesn't come from her intelligence or her lack of disability.
Right. Or the way you expect life to go, or your expectation of it. So what is that experience? I'd like to break it down a little bit. Like, what does that experience look like as an infant? How does it differ from what you saw with your twins?
Right. So everything was just slower. So it's a slower pace of meeting milestones. She had difficulty with feeding right from the beginning. It took her longer to, sit up, to crawl, to walk. But, she was my first. And so I just wanted her to reach those milestones and to beat the ideas of what it means to have Down syndrome and that you're always going to be developmentally delayed. And then when I had the twins and everything was so fast with them, I really could look back and feel happy for the slowness of the pace of what happened with her. That, it was okay for children to take their time. Like when you look back on your child's growing up, like that period of baby and toddlerhood is so fast now that they're 8 years old. And, it's like the majority of their life is going to be as adults and as these, amazing little independent beings. Right. And so to have like a really slow period at the beginning, I think is okay.
Did it feel a little like you got to enjoy it more?
I did, except yes, no. So looking back, I enjoy looking back on it, but during the time of it, I was still going through that intense period of adjustment. Right. So that I probably didn't enjoy it as much as I could have had I had a little bit more perspective.
Yeah, I would imagine. I don't think this is obviously an apples to apples comparison, but I find myself, I get upset with myself if I'm in a regular interaction with my family and I don't look them in the face. Like, when you're doing something else and talking to somebody, I find in hindsight, I look back and I think, that he's not going to live here one day. And I had that conversation with him. I wasn't looking at him. It makes me, I don't know. It makes me, I guess that's what people talk about being present maybe, but I just try to remember that, like, we can stop and do this thing right now. Like, the other day I had some work to do. It was for you guys. And I realized my son was downstairs watching a baseball game, and I just stopped what I was doing and went downstairs and watched the game with him, and we talked and watched the game and stuff, and I just thought, like, I don't know, like, this moment it's only here one time, you know. So that's what I meant by, like, enjoy it. You know.
It's time you don't get back.
Yeah, it's I don't know. You don't realize it until you get older and they get older, usually. Yeah. So, okay, so that's her, like, in that kind of infant experience, is that everything developmentally happens a little slower. But what happens when you get to the next leap, when you're 4 years old and you're expecting, you know, like most kids are getting ready to go to school and things like that? Is that thing happening for P as well, or you have?
Yeah. So we have early intervention preschools here, and she did 2 years of an early intervention preschool, so half days, and then during that time, her sisters were born, and then half day kindergarten, and then regular school, and so we have a really, really wonderful school board that my daughter goes to, and it's fully inclusive. And so when you have fully inclusive school boards, it means that they have more money to spend on EAs to help kids in their regular classroom. Mm-hmm. And so that may not work for some families. It really works well for ours. And P has always had an EA with her in the classroom. So from kindergarten up to grade 7 now, she has an EA in the school. Or one of a couple different EAs during the day to help
Johanna,
her out.
Education assistant?
Education assistant,
okay, okay. Yeah. I was guessing, but I wanted to be sure. That's fine.
Yeah. And that person helps her with adapted curriculum. They can help her with daily living tasks. So taking her to the bathroom and back, helping her open her lunch kit and whatnot. She can do that by herself now, but her fine motor skills are quite delayed. And so even being able to open her lunch kit or the packages by herself, she would need help potentially. And so that person would do that for her. And then help her with her adapted schoolwork as well.
I'm sorry, last part?
Adapted schoolwork.
Okay.
So her schoolwork looks a little bit different than her peers, that she's working a couple of years behind them. But which is fine. She's working at her level, and then she still gets exposure to the other ideas and the discussions that are happening in the classroom, mm-hmm. which I think is to her benefit, whether she can express, her understanding of those ideas or not.
Right. So when does speaking come into play?
She starts around between 2 and 3, really talking. And before that, we did a lot of signing with her. And so she learned, she had well over 100 signs that she knew and that we did with her, and that she brought with her to preschool. And so the signing was really a bridge to her talking, and then really helped with the articulation or understanding, because her articulation is quite impacted in her speech. So, she could say more or help please. And from time to time, I still add in signs now, and she will still sign like sorry on her chest if she's sorry for something, because she has a hard time saying it out loud. But it was really quite a nice bridge for all of us.
Okay. All right. So your expectations are, you're trying to get her to what, like, I mean, if I send my son off to high school, my expectation is he's going to learn a bunch of stuff and either go to college or trade school or something like that. And then he's going to leave here and ruin some other girl's life the way I ruined his mother's. And like that whole thing's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah. So, but what are your expectations for P and your goals?
Just to gain as much independence as possible. So to be able to, bring up her reading level, she can read around a grade 2-3 level right now, which actually isn't terrible. So if we could bring that up to maybe grade 4 or 5 before she leaves school, that would be amazing. I mean, that's the reading level of, the lower, like the Sun, kind of say, newspaper, if anyone reads newspapers anymore. So to bring up her reading level, to be able to do, a little bit of math, and to bring up her independence level so that she can reach as much independence as she can, as a young adult. Okay. And, part of that independence is her diabetes management. And so we do have her involved in her diabetes management. So she has her own phone. She can look at her number on the phone and she can tell us if it's a good or bad number. So she knows that, above 8 is a bad number. And then below 3.9 is a bad number as well. And the rest of them are good numbers. No. And definitely those colors on the Dexcom app help, right?
Oh, I have an idea for you. Actually, but I'm going to tell you in a second, but I want you to tell me, are you thumping your foot or tapping while you're thinking, or is that coming from somewhere else in the house? Because I think you're making points and tapping something.
So, I was tapping my hand.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right. I have to stop Jenny from doing it too, by the way.
Okay.
She gets emphatic and I'm like, stop striking the desk. We're recording this. You've been doing this for years. So what I was going to tell you is that just over the weekend, when you have diabetes and use insulin, low blood sugar can happen when you don't expect it. Gvoke HypoPen is a ready-to-use glucagon option that can treat very low blood sugar in adults and kids with diabetes ages 2 and above. Find out more. Go to gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used in patients with pheochromocytoma or insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk. Are you looking for the Diabetes Pro Tip series, the Bold Beginnings series, Ask Scott and Jenny, algorithm pumping, mental wellness, defining thyroid, defining diabetes, all of the series within the Juicebox podcast? Well, if you're looking for them, I can tell you where to find them. If you're in the private Facebook group, they're all listed in the featured tab of the group. Or you can go to juiceboxpodcast.com and go up to the menu at the top, and you will find links to all of them. You'll get lists of the episodes that include the episode number. Then you just have to go back into your player, find your episode, and you're on your way. You can also listen at juiceboxpodcast.com if you don't want to be bothered with all that player stuff. Though, honestly, that is the best way to listen to a podcast. That's pretty much it, everybody. I appreciate you listening. I'm going to get you right back to Johanna. A lot of podcasts left for you today. I hope you're enjoying it. I'll see you soon. Just over the weekend, I had an interaction with a gentleman, I think his name is Kevin, and he invented something called glucose. Mm-hmm. And Jenny told me about it. Jenny's like, hey, I got a glucose. Have you ever tried this? And I was like, Jenny, I don't know what you're talking about. And she goes, well, I heard about it in your group. And I was like, oh, hold on a second. I do know what you're talking about. So it's this little kind of light that's I'm holding my hands up. Like maybe it's a softball size, I'm imagining. And it, through your Dexcom, I'm assuming she has Dexcom. He has Dexcom, right?
She does.
Right.
Yeah.
So through your Dexcom credentials, you log into it. It goes on Wi-Fi and you assign colors to number ranges. Mm-hmm. And it just changes slowly as you, and I was thinking maybe that might be great for her, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it definitely could be.
Yeah. Just as you were describing, because you've taught her you're basically teaching her ranges by showing her like, here, come to me, I'm assuming, if this number is in this space. Is that how you've set it up with her?
Just more, we have her check regularly and then tell us what the number is and tell if it's good or bad.
Okay.
And so if it is, we know when it's bad because the alarm goes off. Sure. And she knows what the alarm means.
But you're also trying to teach her
yeah.
Joanna, I hate to say this, but like, is everything in your life the focus of when I die? Because that's how it would feel to me. Like, how is this going to work when I'm not here anymore? Would be every one of my concerns, I feel like.
Yeah. No, that's not the focus of my life.
Okay. I might have overstated that, but you know what I mean? Like, it's got to be in the back of your head on some things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I can't tell the future. But people with Down syndrome tend to not live as long as, the typical population. And so, my hope is that she has a really happy life until it ends and that I'm still here.
Oh my God.
And, if not, her sisters will be here. And we live in a place where she would receive funding for like a staff member to live with her, or she could live in a group setting with staff. So I know that she will be taken care of once we're gone. It's just how that looks that we don't know.
So I'm looking here. Is the average age for a person with Down 47? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
What is the what's the physical thing that causes that? Do you know?
Well, so it's hard to say because really people with Down syndrome have only been treated well for the last 30 or 40 years. And so, oftentimes before that, families were told to put their children in institutions where they were mistreated terribly, or their medical concerns were not treated ethically, or the way that you would treat a typical person. And so even in 1980, there was a case where a baby was denied, newborn was denied medical treatment on the recommendation of the doctor. And the parents took that recommendation. It went, I think, to the Supreme Court, and they allowed the baby to die. So in today's day, that would never happen. But there was a lot of medical ableism against children with Down syndrome and people with Down syndrome. So they wouldn't treat the hypothyroidism. They wouldn't treat birth defects like the heart conditions.
Right.
And then they were allowed to die.
Or even like you're describing, like not a natural desire to eat, like those physical functions, like sucking and like that stuff too. Oh, that's crazy. Hey, sit on your hands for me. Pick up your thighs and stick your hands underneath them. Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. Tap on your thigh while we're doing it. It's fine. You just used a word that I'm a little aware of. Medical ableism. Ableism. Sorry. I see that word, and every time I see it, I'm like, I look it up, and I'm trying to make sure I remember. But discrimination in favor of able-bodied people.
That's right. Non-disabled people.
What is that? Well, okay. What does that look like in like real world, like function? Like how could that happen?
So a friend of mine went to the doctor because her daughter's Down syndrome. Her eye was turning in. And so when regular kids have their eye turn in, they see an ophthalmologist, they get treatment for it. You can have surgery for it. And the first doctor that they went to said, well, we don't even know she's using that eye to see because she has Down syndrome.
Oh, you probably don't need your eye. Forget it. Oh, right. I get it. Okay.
Right.
All right.
So
how does that, I'm sorry. How does that look in the zeitgeist in when people do something that's not so material to you, like a doctor who can actually say, no, I'm not going to give you care because you have Down syndrome and you're probably not using your eye. Like, how does that work with just, do you know what I'm saying? Like, where does that term, I'm not asking this question right. Hold on a second. I didn't sleep much last night. I have a daughter with diabetes, Joanne. And so give me a second. How could I do something insensitive as a person who doesn't have actual agency over your daughter? Like, what would that look like? Do you know what I mean? Like, what do people do around you that falls into that category? Is that possible?
No, like for me personally, I would always challenge someone who chose, who said, I'm not going to treat them because of Down syndrome, or I'm only going to look at this because, I don't see that happening around me personally.
Okay. So I'm now remembering the context. I saw somebody talking about, they had a spouse who was having I think they thought of maybe they had borderline personality disorder, and they started talking about the spouse's, overall behavior and attaching it to the idea of the borderline personality disorder. And a third person came into the conversation and said, be careful not to be, and they used this word, which, why can I not pronounce it? Say it again for me.
Medical ableism?
No. Why can't I say ABLEIS? What is that?
That's ableism.
Ableism. Why am I not saying? Oh, it's the way it's split up in front of me. Okay. So somebody came in and said, hey, make sure not to be like, ableist. Because, and then I couldn't figure out what they were saying. And so I guess what they were saying was, don't just blindly attribute the behavior to the disorder. Is that
to
what
the
they,
disability.
you think that's what they
Maybe.
were saying? As I take you way down a path that has nothing to do with your story, but you caught me thinking about it, and you caught me on 4 hours sleep. So,
Okay.
so I might have ADHD at this point in the morning. The two of us together are going to be terrific. Okay. All right. Well,
So
like
a parallel example would be, going in and saying, sorry, P is doing this behavior, and someone says, oh, that's just Down syndrome, or, has a symptom, oh, it's just Down syndrome, without really looking into it.
Mm-hmm.
That's ableist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just disregarding other options because you have this thing and just saying, oh, it's definitely that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I hope everyone listening appreciated it, but I appreciate it. I'm always like, I never quite understand when that word's being used in, and now I do. So great. Okay. So, and I caught you saying our names, and I already wrote it down, so I'll take it out for you later.
Thank you.
Don't worry. Okay. So I wanted to go back to something. I have one last thought, right? You mentioned that she can even have trouble opening her lunch kit or opening her food. Is that still at 12 years old an issue?
Not so much. So she has developed some skills around that. So she's a highly picky eater. I call her highly restrictive eater. Mm-hmm. There's only about 4 or 5 foods that she'll actually eat. And one of those is goldfish crackers. So we get the individual packs of them because we can, how many carbs are in them. Mm-hmm. And she can't open them by herself with her fingers, but she can get a pair of scissors and cut open the top and dump them into a bowl. So she has learned some coping skills around that, about how to do things or how to get things done that work around her, her poor fine muscle control.
What are the other foods that she'll eat?
Right now, hot dogs, cooked carrots, goldfish, and ice cream sandwiches.
How do you get nutrition to her then? Can she take supplements, or what do you do?
I'd like if she would take a supplement. There are no children's vitamins that she will agree to eat. So she won't eat gummies, and then she won't eat any of the fruity chewables because she doesn't like the taste of candy.
Okay.
So we have had sorry, my hands again.
No, you've been doing it the whole time, Johanna, just so you know. Even when you thought you weren't doing it, you were doing it. I assume by now we're all on board with what's happening. So I can feel your angst. You do a great job. Like, just so you know, at the moment I can see Johanna, but she can't see me. And she's answering her questions so thoroughly, but she sort of disappears a little bit into the back of her head while she's answering them. Like, your head goes back a little, you're looking up a little, and you're you're doing a terrific job, by the way. If I gotta live with you tapping on something, don't worry, I will. And I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Although, so far you don't appear to be aware of it, so I don't think you're uncomfortable. but don't think about it twice, please. Except sit on your hands. Don't do it again. No, I'm teasing you. Okay, so there are only a few foods that you'll eat, and so textures are a problem, tastes are a problem, and it's not possible to negotiate with her.
No, we just cannot get her to eat foods that she will not eat.
Mm-hmm.
She just will not do it. And if we get into any of those really negative battles where we're trying to force her to eat, it really just makes her mistrust of us and of food worse. And so we don't do it. We don't get into battles about food.
Okay. Is it
sorry, I got a cough again.
No, you do your thing. Let me ask you, while you're taking care of that, have there been foods that she would eat that she'll no longer eat?
There have been. So it's been a really difficult year this year. So she was diagnosed with diabetes. 3 months later, she got COVID. She became dehydrated. She had a stroke. And after her stroke, her eating and her drinking was impacted. And so she was fully tube fed for quite a while we worked on getting her eating and drinking skills back. And during that time, her food restrictions became worse. So she used to eat a variety of different proteins before. So she'd eat any different kind of protein. She'd eat like pasta with meat sauce, and we could chop up sort of small vegetables in there. And now she won't eat many of those things since that time. And so it really has impacted her in her picky eating with the stroke and then having to go to the feeding tube. So she still has an NG tube. So she's a tube that goes through her nose. And then we will be moving to a G tube. So that's a tube that is on her belly that connects right to her stomach. It's more of a permanent route that we're going to have to take. Right. And so we have to do that for two reasons. So one is because her picky eating is so much that she does not take in enough nutrients to sustain herself. So previously she always took in enough nutrients and enough calories to for her to learn and grow. And we had seen an eating clinic previously, and they said, really, we just recommend that she get a multivitamin if you can get one in her. But they didn't recommend supplementing up until we had the stroke, and we had to. And then the second reason we need the feeding tube is because we need to manage her fluid levels. And so they said that the dehydration is really what caused her stroke. Mm-hmm. And she's not taking in enough liquid now by mouth to manage her fluid levels. So we have to keep the tube in.
Did the stroke have any long-term effects?
Just with eating and drinking. Okay. So those are the big ones. It was a right-sided stroke. And she did regain all of her muscle control and function from the stroke eventually. So it came back within about 3 months. Mm-hmm. It was pretty much back to normal, except for the eating and drinking.
So what I'm hearing is that she has a choice and she doesn't like the choice. It's a no. But now we're talking about things that I assume she wouldn't agree to, like a feeding tube or something like that. So how do you get to those things?
It's really hard. And so we, throughout, the whole experience, we perpetrate medical trauma on her. And so it started with the diabetes. So with the second day, we had to hold her down to do finger pokes. And even to this day, she doesn't allow us to do finger pokes. We do toe pokes. It's the only thing that she'll allow us to do. And even then, it's still upsetting for her. So we did get on the CGM within 3 days of her being diagnosed with diabetes. They got us on a CGM right away so that we didn't have to poke her as much. But we were put on a Libre 2, and with a Libre 2, you're still supposed to poke to confirm lows. And so we were poking her multiple times a day, depending on what the sensor was doing, mm-hmm. which was terrible. Like it was not good. And it was causing her quite a bit of distress, which is why we did eventually move to the Dexcom, which has significantly reduced the amount of pokes that we have to do for her.
Yeah. Well, even putting the CGM on her, like
she's not bad with the CGM. She's okay with that. It's just one poke, and then it's done.
But it's not. It's not a thing where you say to her, "Hey, where we're poking your toes and you hate that. If we use this, less toes." Like, can you go through that? You do.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, this is so we don't have to poke you as much.
And she's
good.
She'll be like, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's good with the CGM. She finds we are in a pump now. And so we did jump through hoops to get the pump early. So we had the pump within 3 months of diagnosis, which is very unusual in our province. Mm-hmm. They ask you to wait a year, but I was really gung-ho at our first endo appointment. Said, what do I have to do to get the pump? I did all of the pre-work that you had to do. I watched the video that I needed to watch. And then while we were hospitalized for the stroke, they agreed to put us on the pump while we were there.
Yeah, Johanna, I don't know anybody who would have the heart to tell you no to something you said that would help your life be easier or your daughter's life be easier. I'd be like, right. let that lady have what she wants. And
right.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. So they really worked with me. I was really happy with it. Mm-hmm. But still, she doesn't like the poke from the pump, and she finds it really upsetting. Last week, we were going through a pump change. I'd taken it off, and we were just getting ready to put it on. And she said to me, "You say sorry for the poke, Mom. You say sorry for the poke." And she said it over and over, and made me apologize to her over and over. And I did, obviously, because I don't like having to do things to my child that she is not okay with and that hurt her body. But we have to, right? So I have to create medical trauma for her. She has to live through medical trauma because this is the only way that we can manage her diabetes.
Well, I have to say, I've been through that. I think a lot of people have been through that. But the difference for us is that it was going to stop at some point, that my daughter was going to understand or, create an understanding for herself. And I mean, I think we've all chased our kids with a needle in our hand, but, with the idea that one day this would become normal and we won't do this anymore. You're stuck in a, I mean,
for now.
Yeah.
For
right.
now.
Do you
and
think,
it
do you
may
think
change.
she makes her, so what do you do? Like, I'm assuming you go to her care team and the people that help her and say, look, here's one of her struggles. How do we get past this? Is it something they work on, or you just kind of hope?
No, and it's not anything I brought to her care team either. It's just something that we work through at home with her. And that it just takes longer for her to process and for her to develop understandings about things. Mm-hmm. And so, even the other day, it seems off topic, but it's not. She said to me, I really miss Grandma and I want her back. And Grandma died 5 years ago. And Phoenix was, 7 when Grandma died. But it's still, comes up for her. That is something that she's processing 5 years later. And of course, I'm still processing 5 years later too. But that, this understanding of grief and loss takes longer to work through. Yeah. And I think that there is grief and loss with diabetes in terms of, your understanding of what life was like before and what life is like now with mm-hmm. diabetes.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's powerful, actually, that came up for her like that. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. I mean, it's been 45 minutes and I stop myself every 35 seconds from asking you if you're okay.
I'm fine.
Okay. I assume you are, you wouldn't be talking about it, but it's still, I'm like, are you okay? Are you okay? Because I mean, you live in a frozen hellscape in Canada. I don't know exactly where, whatever, but
so do you say that, but we have had the nicest, fall that in like living memory. It is 21, 22 degrees every day for the last 6 weeks since summer ended, which I don't know what's the conversion for that, 40 like 70 something.
Okay, all right, well, don't ruin my ruin my misunderstanding of Canada, please. I just wanted to say, do you run out in the snow often and scream into a pile of it? Like, how do you like when you have that thing where, you feel like you're not just feel like, but you are clearly creating medical trauma out of need. Like, I mean, do you not, like, you don't look like you're drunk while I'm talking to you. I don't see any, no. I don't see any heroin needles behind you. I don't know why, but like, what do you do for yourself in that situation? Or do you not stop to think about that?
I try not to stop to think about it. Like, I just have to, the only way past is through. Okay.
I understand. I guess it makes the 8-year-old's ADHD seem like nothing, huh?
No,
not actually, even.
It doesn't.
Like,
no.
Go ahead. What? So then that I'm kind of trying to lead to a question. When you have a child who has this much need, and I want to understand, like, in a 24-hour period, how much time do you think you give to pee? How do you get to something else when other people have needs as well?
Yeah, there's lots of downtime in between when we're doing diabetes tests and not. And so there is lots of time to spend with the other two. We have a really nice bedtime routine that I spend time cuddling with the twins right before bed. So we do, they each get 15 minutes and then we switch. Then iPads are off or lights are off, and then P gets cuddled to sleep, and the other two go to sleep by themselves because P doesn't get cuddle time before lights are off. So it's just a nice balance. I will spend one-on-one time with each of the twins. I'll take them out on an errand, or we'll do mommy-daughter dates. And I tend to do those with the twins and not with P, because P does get a lot of our time and attention.
Okay. Is that why? So does P not get cuddle time because she doesn't do well with it, or because you want the other kids to see that she doesn't get everything? I'm trying to figure out where your thought is.
It's both, right? That she doesn't get everything. And she mostly likes just to be cuddled to sleep. She doesn't care if she gets the cuddle time before.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Right. So it's just meeting each kid's needs in a way that works for them.
Mm-hmm. I would take a cuddle, by the way, if you were around. You seem like a very empathetic lady. I think it would be nice. Speaking of,
I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, listen, my wife got sick on a business trip. I might be in the market for a wage earner around my age anytime now, because she's coughing and holding her chest, and I'm like, uh-oh, this is it. I told the kids already. I was like, do you want me to try a blonde next time, or like, what do you want to do? But my daughter, of course, if you've heard her on the podcast, doesn't trust angular-jawed blonde women. I don't know if you heard her say that, but she's like, blonde ladies with real angular faces, I don't trust them. I was like, what?
I missed that part, but I did listen to both of her episodes. I really enjoyed them.
Oh, maybe this is something she's only shared with me that I'm assuming she said on the podcast. Anyway, I'm glad you enjoyed them. Wow. My next question was about your husband. He's a saint, or he's chained to something? What's going on?
He's neither. So he's involved in almost as much of the diabetes and feeding tasks as I am. I'd say his management of her diabetes is equally as good as mine. And it took him a little while to get around to, we really need to keep her blood sugars quite low. And he's there now. And so he does a really good job of managing them in my absence, or when it's sort of his turn to do it.
Yeah.
So we have some really great A1Cs. So our A1C at diagnosis was 13.8. 2 months later was 8.0, and 5 months later was 5.1.
Look at you. Well, that's amazing.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
So one of the benefits of her being a picky eater is that you really get to know the foods that she eats.
Yeah.
And I really know how to dose for the foods that she eats. So we do a really good job of keeping her blood sugars in range. And when they're not in range, it means that she's gotten up earlier than I have and she started eating, or that her pump's gone and that we need to replace the pump.
Yeah,
so either of those two things.
She doesn't eat anything with any fat in it or protein that would drive up blood sugars later.
She does. Yeah. So the hot dogs and the ice cream sandwiches, they typically cause a spike later on. And then that's mostly at night. And so we really see between sort of 9 and midnight, her blood sugar spikes. So I'm really trying to work with her basal rate at that time. So I've just increased it the other night, and then it went up a little bit last night. So I corrected, and I might try and increase tonight. It's hard though, because sometimes she doesn't get the rise, and then that basal rate is too high. So oftentimes we just correct.
I understand.
But I'm quite on it with the correcting. So we'll start at like 7 correcting.
Earlier, I was just teasing you because I assumed he would run away, but he sounds like a good guy. So
no, he's a really good guy. He adjusted much better than I did with her Down syndrome diagnosis, and he was really a rock at that time. And his perspective was always like, she's fine, she's perfect, it'll be fine.
Yeah,
like that was,
and I just assumed that every time you left to go to the store or something, I'd think, that's it, she's not coming back. Every time I said goodbye to you, it would be like the last time I said, bye, John, I love you. It's been great. I know you're not coming back.
There's something about being a mama bear where
I'll let you do that, right?
Yeah, you just do it.
Yeah, that's something. It really is cool. Yeah. So the diabetes stuff, I'm learning that when people say they're on a pump and don't say it's an Omnipod, they're trying to save my feelings somehow, which is not necessary. But what pump is she using?
It is an Omnipod. So she's on an Eris. And one of the things I dislike about it is that it's because it's that first iteration where you have to use the buttons all the time, and it's not a touchscreen. Okay. And so I really feel like if we're going to move down the path of her learning more independence with her diabetes, she has to be able to use the pump by herself, and she can't with the arrows
you're using the old PDM still.
That's the only one that's funded with my provincial pump program right now. That's why. And so it would be far too expensive to do it on our own.
So I blame Canada.
Yeah, for sure. Blame Canada.
Absolutely. Well, and is that not a song in South Park, Blame Canada?
It sure is.
Yeah, of course.
Sure is.
I just thought I didn't make those words up. I've heard those before. So, so I blame Canada. So you would prefer to be on the Dash or the 5?
Probably the Dash. I don't know about the 5 with the that target blood sugar being sort of higher. I mean, what's amazing is that, our ability to manage her insulin and her A1C is, at the level of the OP5 or exceeds it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. I had considered looping. I'm not quite there yet with, building the app myself.
Mm-hmm.
Although we do have a Mac that I could build it on. And I'm still just mulling it over to see if that will work for us. It will work for us in terms of getting her overnight level really dialed in, but there's a lot of work on my part to get it up and running.
That's exactly what I was hearing. I was like, when are you going to do that exactly? You know what
right.
I mean? Yeah.
Exactly.
And learn a new system and everything else.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But I do think, something that I would like to look at is the, the new, even the Dexcom or the OP5, how user-friendly is it for people with disabilities? Like, how user-friendly would it be for someone who doesn't have great fine motor control? Is there a way that it could be adapted so that to make the screens really simple, or make the app really simple for someone with intellectual disability, so that they could, just, put in their carbs and, press go and be able to do their own insulin?
Well, I have to tell you, I don't think the Loop app would be friendly for her.
No.
Yeah, that would be, because there's a lot of fine touching, even like changing, like as I'm thinking about it, like if you put in a bolus for a meal and decide later, I wish I would have told it was 35 carbs, not 30 carbs. Just touching that, like there's double tapping involved and to highlight things, and that might be difficult, honestly. Yeah. Oh, so
but I wonder if that's, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you need somebody to design a simpler screening system for it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I think that would be a great way. A great sort of side project for someone to take on.
Yeah. Even for older people, it would be valuable there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we do it in an adapted app for people with disabilities?
By the way, I had to close the browser in front of me, because now I look at the word ableism and I think, how the hell were you mispronouncing that, you idiot? It's all like, good. I just kept looking at it thinking, like, what were you doing? Like, oh my goodness. All right. You said you take medication for depression and anxiety?
Yep.
Okay. And that's working for you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because you're in a weird situation where you don't have the benefit of being able to like fall apart. And yet you have a thing that if you were to have a crisis, it's not like something you could just like willfully stop. So has that happened?
Have I had periods of time that I have been unable to cope? Yes, for sure I have. And, I'm in a really fortunate position that I have, quite a bit of sick leave that I could take from work, which I have done in the past. And, all I really need is a doctor's note to do that. And then it kicks in. I still get paid. And then I go back when I'm feeling better after I work with my doctor. And so that's been really helpful. The fact that I've had that as, as something I can do where I can really focus on my family. So when P had her stroke, I took a month off and then went back after that. And everyone was really understanding. So I work in the education system, and really there's a belief that you really do need to focus on your family first, because that is what's important, and that the work will be there when you get back. And it was. Did
your husband kind of like step it up then at that point?
Do more? A little bit. Yeah.
But he has a job, I imagine, too, right? So
he does. Yeah. So we work opposite schedules. So I work during the day. I get home. He goes to work and works in the evening.
Okay.
So we have some crossover on the weekend, but we're in some ways it's like passing ships in the night.
Is that something you set up because of P's situation?
Not necessarily for P, but for the twins as well, and not wanting to pay for childcare because there's two of them, so it's more expensive.
Yeah.
And so the twins have never been in childcare. They've never had before and after care. We have had a long-term aide that works with their family who's been incredible. She started with us when the twins were like 3-4 months old, and she's been with us ever since, and they're 8 now. Mm-hmm. So we do have in-home support, and it's for everybody. It's not just for P. She spends a lot of time with the twins, working with them as well.
You've highlighted something today that I want to just shine a light on for a little longer. I was interviewing somebody recently who was having a lot of anxiety around keeping their kids' blood sugar kind of perfect. And I said, well, I mean, that's not what we do. And I started talking about Arden going to college and the food changing and how that's impacted her blood sugars. And she's like, well, you're okay with her blood sugar being, when she just said a number. And I was like, I mean, I'm not okay with it, but that's the situation. And the sooner I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's an expectation of perfection that we have, or if that's just people's goal for everything to be beautiful and easy and well-funded and, everything, right? There should be birds singing and music playing wherever I walk. And once you can let go of that and not do what you were talking about earlier, like not judge a person against another person or a person against a situation, excuse me, everything just gets so much better. Yeah. And I think what she was saying to me was, but a higher blood sugar could cause problems. And I said, well, yeah, that's true, but you have diabetes. Like you didn't get the same role that other people get. You know what I mean? And also, not for nothing, but how many things in life are damaging you, hurting you, or setting you up for some sort of a problem in the future that you're unaware of, that you ignore too, or that you're aware of and you ignore, one or the other. So I don't know that a 140 blood sugar after a meal is any different than somebody I see walking. I'm thinking of a person I know right now must drink 6 Coca-Colas a day, but doesn't have diabetes, so they don't think anything of it. And I don't know that there's a difference, if that makes sense. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you've been able to, and I know you said it very simply, like, well, this is what had to happen, right? Like I had to see the world this way, which I think you're right. I think that is what you had to do, but it doesn't mean you were going to be able to do it.
Right.
And that's really cool. It's cool that you did that.
Yeah. It was a lot of work to get there.
Yeah. Oh, I would imagine. Like, because I don't know how you don't say why me or why her or why us, And
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I did. But I did get to the point where it didn't matter why, because, well, what I came to is that these things happen in nature. Like that's just what happens, is that sometimes, you get extra chromosomes, sometimes genetic things happen. It's like these things happen, and it happened to me in my body and it happened to her.
Yeah. No.
Just like the diabetes did.
Right.
But I did, with all the work that I did, because of her Down syndrome, when the diabetes came, it wasn't that hard for me to accept. It was harder for my husband to accept. Yeah. But for me, it's like, okay, I've been down this road before. Like I can't bang my head against the wall because it won't change anything. She has diabetes. Let's just go with it.
Right. I ask this question a lot in these scenarios, and I'm frequently surprised by the answer. So I'm going to ask it here. Magic wand, something can go away. What do you pick?
Down syndrome.
Yeah, it seems.
Yeah,
that's what I
thought. Because it created all of the other things, right? Mm-hmm. So it created the alopecia, it created the hypothyroidism, it created the diabetes, it created her brain condition that caused the stroke. So for sure, I would take away the Down syndrome.
Yeah, it's the founder of the feast in this situation, in not a positive way. I mean, I thought obvious, like I said, seems obvious, but the amount of people I've asked questions to where I thought the answers to those questions were obvious, they say something different. Like sometimes people say neither, which I'm like fascinated by. I'm like, you can't even in a make pretend way pick one, and they're like, no. I was like, oh, okay. Or they pick, keeping diabetes over something you would think you wouldn't choose, vice versa. So it's interesting to ask the question. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have, or anything that we've missed?
No, I think we covered everything. It was pretty good.
Are you saying I did a good job? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying you did a good job, Scott.
Because I already earlier said you did a good job and you did not reciprocate, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm teasing you. My God, I don't mean that. How many people do you think heard that are like, oh, so insecure? I really was just joking. Okay, so how much pressure do you feel in this conversation right now not to misrepresent Down syndrome for the people who might hear it, or for the people who are going to be learning about it? Does that feel like a responsibility, or have you not thought about that?
It feels like a background responsibility. It's a responsibility I always have when I'm talking about my daughter. And really, I'm talking about one person with Down syndrome, right, and her experience of what Down syndrome is like and our experience of what Down syndrome is like. And she's an amazing child. Mm-hmm. She's the easiest of all my children. She's very easygoing. She's, happy, and she just loves being with her mom and dad and her sisters. She's really a great part of our family. And so I think it's easy to represent her positively because our experience of her is very positive. Mm-hmm. I mean, all the other conditions up until diabetes and then the stroke have been very manageable and haven't really impacted her life so much. I mean, for sure the alopecia does because she doesn't have hair and she would really like hair. And it's one of the first things that you notice about her when you see her. So whether it's the Down syndrome or the alopecia first, it's sort of up in the air which one it is. Right. And so that's been quite impactful. But in terms of, her day-to-day health, it's been super good. She's never been hospitalized until this year with the diabetes. And she's such a great part of our family.
Yeah, that's cool. I see. It's funny because when I looked at the list, I thought, well, alopecia, that sucks, but great opportunity to wear a bunch of hats. But she can't, that's not the process her mind goes through, right? She doesn't it's just this thing's gone now and it's either a problem for her or it's not. And it ended up being a problem for her. I see. I understand. I have to tell you, having more kids, ballsy as hell. You're either the bravest lady I know or you were high as a kite. I don't know which it was exactly, but I don't know how you we couldn't even make the decision to have a third kid after the diabetes. That's really something. I
didn't want P to be alone in the world after Mike and I were gone. Okay. So I really felt like it was important to have siblings. I felt like having my twin and growing up with siblings was a really wonderful part of my life. And I'm still very close to my twin. And I wanted that for her. Yeah. And the twins are amazing. But definitely, a very different experience than having P, just twins in general.
Does your twin have any of the medical issues that you have?
No. No, and her kids don't have Down syndrome. They're, totally healthy.
And her name is Lucky? Is that what we call her?
No. Her name is Megan.
Oh, okay. Every time you see her, do you look at her and go, you mother?
No.
Okay. All right.
No.
Fair enough. You seem like a decent person. That's what I would do. I'd walk right in. I'd be like, oh, there's the one that just didn't get any of the stuff. No, that's I'm again, almost mostly joking. Okay, so I feel like we're done. Let me tell you right now, because I know you were very concerned about it. I've made a note every time you use P's real name.
Thank you.
Every time you cursed, you said
once.
That's right. Yeah. You did. I was like, oh, she is Canadian. That's what I thought as soon as that happened. And you used your husband's name. Do you want that out, or is that okay?
That's okay.
Okay, great. I can't thank you enough for doing this.
It's my pleasure. And thank you.
Yeah. Do you actually listen to the podcast, or are you just doing this out of kindness?
I do. Or? So strangely enough, I did not listen to podcasts until P got diabetes. And then I found your podcast within days of her diagnosis, and I listened obsessively. And it's the only podcast I listen to. Oh. So I probably listen to hundreds of them now, but I really do find value. I love both I love both listening to people with diabetes and their lived experience. And I really enjoy listening to the parents as well. So I like that you have both on there because I think they're both valid experiences. But yeah, I really enjoy it.
Isn't it a strange thing that the sentiment, it's lovely of you to have parents and adults with type 1 diabetes on the same type 1 diabetes podcast? Isn't it odd that that's not just obvious to people sometimes, right. I had somebody on with type 2 once and I got a note, never have people with type 2 on again. I was like, what? She's like, this is a podcast for type 1s. I was like, no, that's not what I'm doing. I was like, why are we? It's
your podcast. You can do whatever you want with it.
Also, I can pretty much do whatever I like. Yeah. And by the way, I always think this too. It's free. Shut up. Yeah. That's just so everyone knows, any of your feedback that comes in, my first thought is, hey, it's free. Shut up. And then I go to your the substance of what you've said. But
right.
I and this podcast brought you into the world of podcasts. You did not listen to any, and now you listen to many.
Well, I listened to yours.
Oh, do you listen
I don't
to
really
others?
Listen to any other podcasts.
Oh, when you said hundreds, you meant you've listened to hundreds of mine.
Yes, hundreds of your episodes.
Oh, I thought, well, that's better than what I thought. I thought you meant you were listening to other podcasts. And I was like, well, that takes away from the time you can listen to mine. So I'm not thrilled about that. But that's
I listened to your episodes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then that's the review I want from you on Canadian Apple Music, the only podcast I listen to.
I did a review at one point. I don't remember what I said.
Well,
but
that's very nice. I'm going to turn it into a T-shirt and sell it to people. The only podcast I listen to. Anyway, thank you so much for doing this. Would you hold on for 1 second for me?
Sure.
Thanks. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. And don't forget to check everything out at juiceboxpodcast.com. And if you're going to support the sponsors, please use my links. They're available in the audio app you're listening in right now, in the show notes of those apps, and at juiceboxpodcast.com. Or just please take the time to write them down and type them into a browser. It really does help the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.